Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation. My name is Dylan Settle. I'm a second-year master's student in the History Department here at Virginia Tech, advised by Dr. Amanda Demmer. My project is entitled Checking the Chief Diplomat, the Role of Congress in the Sale and Transfer of Weapons Globally and the U.S.-Israeli Special Relationship, 1977 to 1989. To begin, Article 2, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution outlines, along with several other powers, the ability for the executive branch, headed by the president, to appoint ambassadors and make treaties. Because of these powers, Americans have given the title of chief diplomat to the sitting president of the United States. Beginning with the Truman presidency in the immediate aftermath of World War II and the early years of the Cold War, presidents began to attempt to expand these powers, creating what was first coined by Arthur Schlesinger in his book on the subject, The Imperial Presidency. One of the major hallmarks of this expanded power within the executive branch was the increased calls for and uses of arms sales within American foreign policy. These same arms deals also established the backbone of the U.S.-Israeli alliance, which has become known as the special relationship within scholarship. Particularly, the blank check narrative within this same scholarship on the topic, which states that whatever arms Israel requests, be it planes, equipment, or any of the sorts, the U.S. gives them. This project focuses on congressional action through mainly hearings by the House Committee on Foreign Affairs during the later years of the Cold War under the Carter and Reagan administrations to slow down these aggressive arms sale policies in both the United States by rallying support within Congress to stop support for militaristic policies from the White House, as well as Israel through the sale of arms to nearby states hostile to the Zionist government. The originality comes from this perspective. By focusing on the role Congress plays in foreign policy instead of solely the White House, it opens up new analytical approaches to the topic. At the same time, by dismantling the blank check narrative and historiography on the special relationship, my work allows for a fuller, more nuanced understanding of the U.S.-Israel alliance. While some of the pushback on expanded presidential powers came during the Nixon and Kissinger era in the form of human rights-related hearings conducted by Representative Donald Fraser in the early 70s, much of the pushback on arms sales did not occur until after Carter took office in 1977. That year signaled a massive shift in power for both the United States and Israel. In the U.S., the inauguration of Jimmy Carter saw an end to the Nixinger era and a turn away from the more realism-driven policies of the High Cold War. In Israel, 1977 saw the appointment of the first Israeli prime minister from the Likud party, the more conservative of the Israeli political machine, with Menachem Begin. While Carter, under the guise of human rights and democracy, was attempting to shy away from the use of arms sales in foreign policy, Begin's regime attempted to further militarize Israel by developing relations through foreign military sales with the apartheid regime in South Africa, which includes nuclear technology, and many of the authoritarian governments throughout Latin America. To establish more parity within the region, Carter proposed what has become to be called the Middle East Package Airplane Sale in 1978. While arming Israel with new F-15 and F-16 fighters, this deal, combined with a similar plan proposed the next year, also planned to send these same aircraft to Saudi Arabia and Jordan, among others, two states Begin's regime deemed hostile to Jerusalem. While Congress backed the president on these deals, they used hearings on the topic to further supplant their place at the decision-making table, such as when Representative Clement Zablocki, the Wisconsin Democrat charged with chairing the Foreign Affairs Committee during this time, thrashed an Israeli lobby member for even suggesting that these aircraft were, quote, unnecessary, end quote, for states other than Israel. The inauguration of Ronald Reagan in 1981 signaled an end to the more liberal policies under Carter and a return to the realism-driven ideology of earlier administrations. One of the main hallmarks of this switch was the return of calls and uses for arms sales from the White House. For Israel, the election of Reagan strengthened the relationship between Washington and Jerusalem. This relationship was fully realized with the 1981 Memorandum of Understanding on Strategic Cooperation. This agreement, which contained the Meridor Plan, named after Israeli cabinet member Yaakov Meridor, gave Israel the full, unchecked support from the U.S. to sell weaponry throughout the Third World. Israel used this plan to further establish relationships in Latin America, opening up diplomatic ties with states like the Dominican Republic, Uruguay, Costa Rica, Honduras, and others. At the same time, the Reagan White House pushed for more arms to Israel, ensuring their military dominance within the tumultuous Middle East region. While this continued throughout Reagan's first and even into his second term, these plans came crashing down with the uncovering and investigation into the Iran-Contra scandal. As Congress began to uncover the administration's illicit and illegal use of arms sales to Nicaraguan rebels through Iran, they also uncovered the large role Israel played in the deal as well, leading to some scholars terming Iran-Contra as, quote, Israelgate, end quote. The intense congressional pressure forced the Reagan White House to withdraw its support for many of the proposed arms sales by both Washington and Jerusalem. At the same time, under this pressure from Congress, Israel was also forced to withdraw many of the alliances it had made during this period, most notably with the apartheid regime in South Africa. This decades-long push against executive power, ending with the uncovering of Iran-Contra, gave Congress a seat at the table in foreign policy, decreased the extent of presidential power, and while perhaps only temporarily, ended the blank check on arms sales to Israel. Lastly, while this project is historical in nature, it does allow for a better understanding of the processes and impact of foreign military sales, both domestically and abroad. As arms sales are still a major foreign policy tool for U.S. decision makers, a further understanding of these deals plays a key role in national security. Also, like many of the scholars used for this project, many see the U.S.-Israeli relationship as either a client-state interaction where the U.S. controls Israeli actions or one where Israel only acts within U.S. interests. That is simply not the case. While the Zionist state may be a strong ally, they also act within their own plans and intentions. Failing to understand and act on this could lead to a national security crisis of untold proportions. This is my reference page, and thank you again for listening to my presentation.